Welcome to the channel and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into what is honestly one of the most complex and frankly fascinating geopolitical chess matches happening right now. We're breaking down the India-China border dynamic. Now there's a ton of noise out there on this topic, so we're relying on some recent data-driven analyses to look objectively at the facts, the historical patterns, and the strategic maneuvers playing out on the ground. It's basically a masterclass in modern geopolitics, so let's just get right into it. So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to look at local claims versus the official stance, China's four-step aggression playbook, the Ladakh pattern, a really interesting economic paradox, the megadam threat, and finally, how to prepare for the future. All right, let's dive into part one, local claims versus official stance. To really grasp what's going on, we have to look at this glaring contradiction on the ground. Recently, a local tribal community in Arunachal Pradesh sent out a detailed memorandum stating that their ancestral grazing lands, places they freely roamed just a few years ago, are now occupied by the Chinese People's Liberation Army. And we're talking about new military camps and helipads confirmed by independent satellite imagery. But in sharp contrast to this, the official government stance consistently denies any incursions, basically saying that there are no incursions here, just differing perceptions of where the border actually is. And that brings us to a term you've probably heard a lot, the line of actual control, or the LAC. The source points out that this de facto border totally lacks consensus. And guys, we're not talking about a few meters of disagreement here. The discrepancy between how India and China map this border is over 1,300 kilometers. It's a massive gap. And this huge gray area is exactly where so much of the strategic maneuvering takes place. It's why even a tiny spark here could easily ignite a much larger global crisis. Okay, moving on to section 2, China's four-step aggression. So China claims over 80,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh as its own territory. And the analysis breaks down their strategy to claim it into 4 deliberate tactical steps. You've got renaming, building specific defense villages, upgrading infrastructure, and finally, a tactic known as salami slicing. Let's walk through exactly how each of these plays out. Step 1 is what geopolitical experts call cartographic aggression. Basically, before any troops even move, the maps change. By officially renaming places in Arunachal Pradesh through their standard government gazetteers, and then pushing those maps out to the rest of the world, China lays a legalistic, bureaucratic groundwork for their claims. It is literally aggression played out on paper first. And you can see how this tactic is escalating. Back in 2017, China officially renamed 6 places. Then in 2021, they renamed 15 more. By 2023, another 11 locations had their names changed on Chinese maps. So it's this slow, steady drumbeat designed to normalize their territorial claims internationally over time. Now, steps 2 and 3 involve actual physical development on the ground, but with a major catch. The source highlights that between 2018 and 2022, China built over 600 of these defense villages right along the border. They might look civilian on the surface, but they are entirely dual use. They're connected by heavy-duty roads, they have helipads, and they're designed to act as military supply nodes in a heartbeat. Couple that with the rapid upgrade of 37 airports and heliports across Tibet and Xinjiang, and you're looking at a formidable network built for total air and ground superiority. Which brings us to the 4th, and honestly the most potent step, salami slicing. The key thing to understand here is that China rarely makes massive, sudden land grabs that would spark an all-out war. Instead, they just take it slice by slice. A pasture over here, a ridge there, a new road down in the valley. By the time anyone notices or raises a flag, the infrastructure is built, the troops are entrenched, and China just claims they were acting within their own perception of the border. That brings us to section 3, the Ladakh pattern. To see how these exact tactics play out in reality, we have to look back at May and June of 2020, when all this simmering tension finally boiled over in the Galwan Valley. Chinese troops moved into areas that were previously patrolled by India, and it resulted in a brutal clash. Tragically, 20 Indian soldiers lost their lives. It was absolutely the lowest point in India-China relations since 1962, and it fundamentally altered the entire strategic landscape. Now, following those clashes, years of diplomatic talks led to officially declared disengagements and the creation of buffer zones. Publicly, these were hailed as big diplomatic wins, but the source we're looking at highlights a much harsher reality on the ground. Military experts note that these new buffer zones often overlap entirely with territory that India actually used to patrol. As a result, locals report they've permanently lost access to their traditional grazing areas. So in effect, the line was quietly shifted. All right, Section 4, the economic paradox. You might assume these kinds of territorial clashes would just totally sever ties, right? Well, despite the military standoff, look at the economics. In the 2024 to 2025 period, India imported a massive $113 billion worth of goods from China, while exporting a mere $14 billion back. That leaves an eye-watering trade deficit of nearly $99 billion. Economically, these two nations are just deeply, inextricably linked. Immense capital is flowing directly into the Chinese economy, fueling the exact same supply chains the world relies on. The source points out a really striking contrast here between public optics and core economics. Remember right after the Galwan clashes? There was that highly publicized move to ban over 300 Chinese apps, including TikTok, which was framed as this severe economic strike against China. Yet the data shows that behind the scenes, core, heavy-duty imports from China have actually surged to record highs since 2020. So the economic reliance hasn't weakened at all. If anything, it's deepened. And this paradox exists right alongside ongoing diplomatic slights that carry a very real human cost. Because China claims Arunachal Pradesh as its own, it flat out refuses to recognize the Indian passports of residents from that state. The source actually shares a troubling anecdote about a woman from Arunachal who was just transiting through the Shanghai airport. She was detained and harassed for 18 hours, simply because China refused to acknowledge the validity of her passport. Let's move to Section 5, the mega dam threat. Let's take a step back and look at the macro-level view for a second. Beyond the border skirmishes, the analysis highlights a massive infrastructural project that poses a profound strategic challenge. 60,000 megawatts. Let that number sink in. That is the projected capacity of the Meedog hydropower station China is building on the Brahmaputra River. To put that into perspective, this dam is projected to be 3 times larger than the famous Three Gorges Dam. It would literally be the largest in the world. And the details here are staggering. At an estimated cost of up to $140 billion, this dam is being built just 50 kilometers from the Indian border. With construction slated to begin in mid-2025 and commercial operations expected by 2033, we have to realize this isn't just an energy project, it's a strategic choke point. By controlling the flow of the Brahmaputra River, China gains immense leverage. Plus, researchers warn that the dam sits right on an active fault line. An earthquake there could trigger catastrophic flooding downstream through Arunachal Pradesh and all the way into Bangladesh. Finally, Section 6, preparing for the future. So when you look at the salami slicing, the massive trade deficits, and the mega dams, a pretty sobering picture of a technological arms race starts to emerge. While China is aggressively advancing towards 6th-generation fighter jets, mastering machine learning, AI, and reusable rockets to compete directly with the US, India's defense sector is estimated to be still about 10 years away from deploying indigenous 5th-generation fighters. This technological gap, much like the trade deficit we talked about earlier, is a critical factor in this whole geopolitical dynamic. And honestly, that is the ultimate takeaway from this analysis. With differing perceptions of the border allowing for these incremental land grabs, a deep economic reliance, and a widening gap in next-generation military technology, we have to ask the tough question: is India truly prepared for the complex, multi-front challenges of tomorrow? It's a question that goes far beyond simple lines on a map, and it's one that is going to shape the geopolitics of Asia for decades to come. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer here on the channel. I really hope this helped you see the bigger picture. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.